In the heart of the countryside, there was a road that was said to be cursed. It was a winding, narrow path that snaked through the dense forest, cutting a path between towering trees and deep ravines. Few dared to venture onto it, as strange things were said to happen there at night. One day, a group of friends decided to take a road trip through the countryside. They had heard about the cursed road and were curious to see it for themselves. As they drove along the winding path, they could feel an oppressive atmosphere closing in around them. The trees seemed to press in closer, the air grew thick with an unnameable dread. Suddenly, the car stalled. No matter how hard they tried, the engine would not turn over. They were stranded in the middle of the cursed road, with no way to call for help. As the sun began to set, the friends began to realize that they were not alone. Strange sounds echoed through the woods, the crunch of leaves and the snap of twigs. Shadows flitted between the trees, and the friends caught glimpses of dark shapes moving in the underbrush. They huddled together in fear, as something began to draw closer. At first, they thought it was an animal, but as it emerged from the trees, they realized it was something far worse. A creature with twisted, gnarled limbs, skin as black as midnight and eyes that glowed with an unholy light. It towered over them, its breath coming in ragged gasps as it reached out with long, clawed fingers. The friends ran, screaming, but it was no use. The creature was faster, stronger, and more determined than they could ever hope to be. One by one, it picked them off, dragging them into the shadows and tearing them apart. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the cursed road was once again deserted. The only sign of the friends was their abandoned car, the doors thrown open and the interior coated in blood. No one knows what happened to them, but those who dare to drive along the cursed road now do so with fear in their hearts, knowing that they may never return. In the peaceful countryside, nestled amidst rolling hills and verdant fields, there stood an old house that had been abandoned for decades. Locals whispered tales of the house being cursed and haunted by the ghost of a woman who had died a tragic death many years ago. The story goes that the woman, whose name was Isabel, had lived in the house with her husband and young daughter. One day, her husband died in a farming accident, leaving her to care for their child alone. Devastated and grief-stricken, Isabel became increasingly reclusive, rarely leaving the house and only interacting with her daughter. As time passed, strange things began to happen in the house. Neighbors reported hearing ghostly wails and moans coming from within its walls. Some even claimed to have seen a figure resembling Isabel wandering the halls, her long hair flowing behind her as she moved silently through the rooms. Despite these rumors, a young couple named Rachel and Thomas decided to purchase the house and renovate it, hoping to turn it into their dream home. But as soon as they began their work, strange things started happening. Tools would go missing, and doors would slam shut on their own. They heard footsteps in the empty halls and saw shadows moving in the corners of their eyes. One night, as Rachel was in the kitchen making dinner, she felt a cold breeze and heard a soft whisper in her ear. She turned around, but no one was there. Suddenly, she felt a cold hand brush against her shoulder, and she let out a scream. Thomas rushed into the room, but he couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. But as they stood there, frozen in fear, they both saw a figure materialize in front of them, the ghost of Isabel, her eyes glowing in the dim light. Rachel and Thomas both ran out of the house, never to return. To this day, the house remains abandoned, and locals still swear that they can hear Isabel's ghostly cries and see her wandering through the empty halls. The tale of the cursed house has become a legend, passed down from generation to generation, a cautionary tale for anyone who dares to disturb the peace of the countryside. Once upon a time, there was a charming country farmhouse nestled in the rolling hills of a quaint little town. It had been in the family for generations and had seen its fair share of hard work and laughter. The farmhouse was a simple yet sturdy structure, made of weathered wood and stone, with a large wraparound porch that looked out onto a lush green pasture. The yard was dotted with colorful wildflowers, and the air was always filled with the sweet scent of honeysuckle. The family who owned the farmhouse were a hard-working bunch, rising early each day to tend to the crops and animals. They raised chickens, cows, and pigs, and tended to their fields of corn, wheat, and soybeans. They were a self-sufficient family, living off the land and their own hard work. Despite the long days and hard work, the family found joy in their simple way of life. They would gather on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and share stories and laughter. The farmhouse was a place of warmth and love, where the family felt safe and secure. Over the years, the family made many memories in their country farmhouse. They celebrated weddings and births, mourned the loss of loved ones, and weathered storms and hardships together. Through it all, the farmhouse stood as a symbol of their strength and resilience. As time passed, the family grew and changed. The younger generations moved away to seek their fortunes in the city, leaving the farmhouse to the older members of the family. But they continued to work the land and care for the animals, passing on the traditions and values of their ancestors. The farmhouse became a beacon of hope and inspiration to others in the community, a testament to the enduring spirit of the hard-working people who called it home. And although the world around them may have changed, the farmhouse remained a constant, a place of refuge and peace in an ever-changing world. Once upon a time, there was an old farm situated in the middle of nowhere. It had been abandoned for years due to a tragic incident that happened on the property. The story goes that a young couple used to live there, but one night, a fire broke out in the house, and they were unable to escape. Years later, the farm was purchased by a young family who planned to renovate it and turn it into their dream home. But they soon realized that something was not quite right with the property. Strange things started happening as soon as they moved in. Doors would open and close on their own, objects would move without any explanation, and they could hear footsteps in empty rooms. Initially, they tried to ignore the strange occurrences, thinking it was just their imagination. But the more they tried to convince themselves that there was nothing unusual happening, the more intense the paranormal activities became. It reached a point where they could no longer deny that something supernatural was happening on the farm. One night, the family woke up to find all the doors in the house were wide open, and a cold breeze was blowing through the halls. Suddenly, they heard footsteps coming from upstairs. They hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of them, and they went up to investigate. As they approached the top of the stairs, they saw a faint figure standing in the shadows. The figure was that of a young woman, with long hair and a flowing white gown. The woman was staring at them with hollow eyes, and her skin was as pale as snow. The family froze, unable to move or speak, as the ghostly figure slowly started to approach them. The ghostly woman moved closer and closer, and as she got within touching distance, she vanished into thin air. The family was left shaken and frightened, realizing that the farm was haunted by the spirits of the young couple who had lost their lives in the fire. From that day onwards, the family decided to leave the farm and never returned. They say that the farm is still haunted by the spirits of the young couple, and those who dare to enter the property risk encountering their ghostly presence. The farm remains abandoned to this day, with the memory of the tragic incident haunting it forever.